Hi, my name is Mike Wheeler, and I would like to share a story with you about a modern day family from a small town in Kansas who experienced a series of trials that parallel those experienced by Job from the Bible. Charlie is a fictional story that takes place in modern times. Charlie and his wife Claire own a ranch near the town of Wamego, Kansas, which is near Manhattan. The book Charlie is available on Amazon in both Kindle and paperback formats. Some of you may want to get the book and follow along with the written text, but I am sharing the entire story here on YouTube. There are people who believe that the book of Job is simply a story passed down through Jewish tradition. But the Bible tells us that Job was a real man who existed in time and space, and his story is historical and factual. That reality is confirmed in many places in our Bible. Writing under the divine inspiration of the Holy Spirit, James compared Job with prophets who remained steadfast, and Ezekiel compared Job's faith with the faith of Noah and Daniel. Those references alone attest to the fact that Job, the man, along with the story that bears his name, is both historical and factual. Job's story is one of adversity and suffering. It also pictures God's sovereignty over his creation. But any simple label attached to these 42 chapters in God's Word is woefully inadequate to describe the many facets of God's love, creative, and redemptive purposes that are revealed in Job's story. The book of Job points us to God in all of his glory, majesty, and power, yet it points us to an infinite creator who is willing to meet us in our deepest trials and invites us into an intimate personal relationship with him. Charlie, this book, is entirely a work of fiction. Charlie, the central character in the book, is intended to portray a 21st century man with similar experiences to those described in Scripture. With the exception of Job, the man, any resemblance to actual events or persons living or dead is entirely coincidental. All Scripture references, unless otherwise noted, are from the Holy Bible, English Standard Version, copyright 2001 by Crossway, a publishing ministry of Good News Publishers.
Just the Next Thing. September 22nd, 2017, Friday morning. It started as a quiet Friday morning. Claire was putting on her makeup and preparing for a trip into town to take care of some errands. She assumed that Charlie was in the living room having his devotional time, as was his custom. Her husband had maintained his discipline for a daily quiet time in Bible study and prayer for many years. As she continued with her morning routine, she reflected on the last few years of their lives and the difficulties that they had faced together. Charlie had always been the strong one. In the face of each one of their trials, Charlie had always been the encourager. He had a way of sorting through the malaise to maintain perspective, and, in most situations, he was careful to listen to Claire with compassion and understanding. Charlie's voice became the lighthouse in the storm and her place of refuge when she was at her lowest points. He was quiet but reassuring, and he was strong but compassionate. Even in her time of reflection, she knew that Charlie had also reached a low point in his struggle. "God, please speak to him this morning," she whispered. "Bring back the man that I know he is. Show him who you are." There was a quiet pleading in her voice. Claire's quiet morning prayer was disrupted when she heard the loud crash of glass shattering and a loud cry of anguish coming from the kitchen. Rushing into the room, she found Charlie on the floor against the wall, where he was sobbing uncontrollably. His hand was covered with blood. "What is going on?" she demanded as she noticed that the window on the door had been shattered. "What have you done, Charlie?" But Charlie just sat there with his hands covering his face. Tears rolled down as he mumbled the words over and over again. I just can't take this anymore. Why doesn't God give me any relief? When will this nightmare end? As she listened to the pain in his voice, Claire's heart was softened. She knelt beside her husband and asked, "What happened this morning, sweetheart? Do you remember when they told us?" Charlie's voice was just above a whisper. "She was lucky to be alive. They told us that she would probably be mentally or physically delayed." "Boy, were they wrong," Claire replied. "That little 3-pound, 9-ounce bundle of joy and fire fooled everyone." "It's hard to believe that was 33 years ago today," Charlie whispered. "She was just like her daddy," Claire responded. "Yeah, stubborn, headstrong, and never taking no for an answer," Charlie countered. "But smart and beautiful, just like her mom." Jessica Jessie Anita Christian was the firstborn daughter of Charlie and Claire Christian. She arrived in this world 2 months earlier than expected, and the doctors expected complications. "Charlie?" Claire was looking for answers. "Would you like to tell me why my kitchen window was shattered and why you're bleeding all over my clean kitchen floor?" "It's just the next thing," Charlie repeated. "It's just the next thing." He lifted his bleeding hand and pointed to the broken window. Claire looked out the broken window and saw the large tree limb that had fallen on the hood of Charlie's old truck during last night's storm. Under most circumstances, Charlie would not have responded this way, but this couple's experiences over the past few years were far from normal. It should not have been a big deal, but the old red and white 1972 Ford F-100 sitting under the tree had belonged to Charlie's dad, who had died just 20 years ago. More than that, Claire knew Charlie's response was just the next straw piled on top of a mountain of painful trials, pain, and suffering that had been accumulating over the past few years. It was, as Charlie said, just the next thing. Claire knew the meaning of those words all too well. This morning, Charlie had gotten up from his quiet time to pour himself a cup of coffee. When he looked out the window and saw the limb laying across the hood of his father's truck, he snapped. He attempted to slam his fist against the doorframe in his rage. His fist hit the window instead, and the result was a series of lacerations on his hand and his wrist. Just the next thing. Just the next thing had pushed Charlie to a momentary breaking point. Claire wanted to scream at Charlie. She had experienced the same suffering that he had. Through it all, she had never left Charlie's side. But for her, this was a time when she felt she needed to be the voice of encouragement. She put aside her emotions to minister to the man who had been her Rock of Gibraltar, her provider and protection, and her soulmate over the past 35 years. Her love for him had grown deeper and deeper as she walked with him through an unbelievable series of painful events. None of these events ever threatened their marriage as they strived together to work through them, one at a time, while lifting each other along the way. Charlie and Claire were both strong in their faith, but that faith had been tested to the limit. When Claire was down, Charlie tried to lift her up. When his own confidence faltered, she ministered to him. This morning was not much different. At the moment, there was a tree limb on the truck, a broken window to repair, a hand that needed stitches, and a husband whose emotions were so raw that she could not even think of her own pain. "Charlie," Claire's voice was quiet and loving. "Why don't you call Chris and tell him you can't help him this afternoon? We need to get you to a doctor first. We can take some cardboard over the window and then take a look at the damage to the truck." Charlie's voice was a little sarcastic. "Chris has been good to me. This skin crap has kept me from being there for him when he has needed help. I made him a promise." Chris Waters was a close friend of Charlie's. He maintained a farm growing milo and soybeans on the other side of town. They had always tried to help each other out through the years whenever they could. "How am I supposed to function? How am I supposed to rebuild? How am I going to make all of this come together when every day is an uphill battle? Charlie's voice was pleading and getting louder when he cried out, "How, God? How? How?" Then he began to shake, and the tears came back. Charlie looked up at his wife. She had allowed him to vent without responding. She waited silently for what she knew would come next. Then Charlie spoke. "I know. This is not getting done. The horse has kicked me again, and I can sit here whining, belly aching, and feeling sorry for myself for so long. I need to shut up, get up, and get going, don't I?" Claire looked at Charlie and responded, "I didn't say anything, but I do trust you, and I want to be there by your side. Tell me what you want to do next." Just the next thing. To fully comprehend those words, we'll have to roll the clock back a few years and look at the changes that had taken place in their family. This was another challenging chapter in a series of struggles in the lives of two people who had, up to that point, lived prosperous, happy, and healthy lives. For Charlie and Claire, this incident involving a damaged truck, a broken window, and a lacerated hand was really not a big deal. But it certainly was just the next thing. The challenge. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. The Lord said to Satan, "From where have you come?" Satan answered the Lord and said, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it." And the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, who fears God and turns away from evil?" Job, 1st chapter, 6th through the 8th verses. Margie's Cafe, March 13th, 2009. Friday morning, Wamego, Kansas. The sign on the window reads, "Margie's Cafe," where the locals meet for breakfast, lunch, and dinner since 1968. Margie Sanderson was 25 years old when she opened her diner on the edge of town with the help of her mother. True to the message on the window, Margie's was where many locals gathered for a home-style meal. It was also where gossip, politics, sports, weather, and other important issues were discussed and resolved. Charlie was part of a small group of men who regularly met on Friday mornings at 6 o'clock a.m. The group typically included Dale Manning, the local fire chief, Luke Farley, the county sheriff, Jeff Graham, who owned a ranch across the road from Charlie, and Chris Waters, a local farmer. "Can you believe we were knocked out in the first round?" Chris began, referring to last night's loss by Kansas State against Texas in the first round of the Big 12 conference tournament. "We just did not play well," Charlie answered. "Maybe we'll do better in the NIT. "Chris, why don't you introduce your friend to us this morning?" This particular morning, the men welcomed a visitor to the group. Devlin Barber was a Manhattan attorney whom Chris had invited. Charlie was the first to greet him. "Devlin, is it? Always nice to meet a new face. Chris tells me you are a lawyer in Manhattan." "I am," Devlin replied. "Hope you don't mind me joining you. I just moved into town. I enjoy working in Manhattan, but I needed to get my family out of the hectic life of a college town." "So, what kind of law do you guys practice?" Jack asked. "I am a junior partner in a larger firm in Manhattan," Devlin answered. "The firm is Cheatham, Quick, and Hyde, and our offices are just off Humboldt Street if you're familiar with the area. My specialty is labor and employment law, but our firm is more well known for its personal injury litigation." "You mentioned family," Charlie inquired. "Yeah, right now it's just me and my wife, Carol," Devlin answered. "But we are about 4 months away from adding twins to our family. No kidding, Charlie responded. My son Caleb and his wife are due for twins themselves. I think they're due around the end of July. First grandchild? Devlin asked. No, my daughter has 2 children already. Jesse's son Noah just turned 2 last week, and Hannah is a little over 7 months, Charlie answered. She is a mess. All right, boys, it's time to order something. I've got a fine dining establishment to run here, you know. The sarcastic voice behind Jack was none other than Margie herself. Yes, ma'am, Jack quipped. Can't get in the way of commerce around here. As Margie began taking orders around the table, Jack looked across the table at Charlie. Charlie, we both need to get started on the burn. Do you want to work together again, like we did last year? Absolutely, Charlie responded. It worked very well last year. We can start by moving your stock first. When we get finished, we can take care of my place. I can recruit some temporary help from Mayetta. Pardon my ignorance, Devlin interjected. This sounds interesting. What is the story behind the burn? It's actually a process that we learned from the Native Americans around this area of the country, Chris answered. Long before there were cattle in this area, Luke interjected, the Native Americans hunted bison for food, clothing, and other lifestyle purposes. The Flint Hills prairies of Kansas and Oklahoma are well known for their native tall grasses that are especially well suited for the bison and, later on, the cows that our ancestors brought into the region. Not to bore you with the details, Charlie picked up the story. We love to tell the story of our area of the country, but the main reason the beef is so good here is because of the native grasses, and the reason the grasses are so prolific is because of the type of soil. When settlers moved into the area, they found the ground too difficult to plow, Chris continued. Just below the surface, there are alternating layers of limestone and shale, with a large quantity of flint deposits in them. The root systems in the native tall grasses are capable of penetrating deeper into the ground better than any other type of grass. It was God's way of protecting and preserving the ecosystem from widespread plowing, Charlie interceded. What makes it so unique is that the very same limestone that makes it so hard to plow is rich in calcium. The calcium erodes into the soil, enriching the plants and making them more nutritious for the cattle and bison grazing there. For our Native American ancestors, like the Pawnee, Kansa, and Osage people, Charlie continued, the flint was useful in making tools and weapons, and the prairie grasses kept the bison well fed and healthy. Interesting, Devlin interjected. So, where does the burn come in? I guess we got a little off topic, Jack answered. One of the things that we learned from Native Americans in the area was that a periodic burning of the native grasses enabled new growth to spring up, and that new growth was richer and more pleasing to the animals who grazed here. They did it in order to keep the bison from leaving the area. For us, Charlie continued, we use a more sophisticated method for doing exactly what our Native American brothers did before us. Most of the ranchers in the area move their cattle to one part of their ranch, while they use a controlled burn on another area of the ranch. Some like to do it once every 2 years, and others, like Jack and I, prefer to rotate the burn every year. So we move our livestock to one side of the property and execute a strategic burn in another area of the ranch. That's something we didn't cover in law school. Devlin laughed. By the way, Charlie asked, where did you go to law school? I was hoping you wouldn't ask me that, Devlin responded. I have to confess, I'm a Jayhawk, class of 2002. Ouch, Charlie laughed. I don't guess they told you that I'm a card-carrying member of an organization called Partnership for a Jayhawk-Free America. Everyone laughed. Charlie reached out to shake Devlin's hand. It's great to meet you, new friend. I hope you will join us again next week. blessings to you, Carol, and those new babies on the way. Shiloh. In Jeremiah chapter 7 and Psalm chapter 78, the name Shiloh indicated a dwelling place for the Lord. When Charlie's grandfather, James Slim Christian, purchased the first 40 acres of his new ranch, he gave it the name of Shiloh to stand as an ongoing reminder of the one to whom he and his family would always look as provider and sustainer. Over the years, Charlie worked the ranch with his father and grandfather to turn it into a thriving ranch operation. Today, Shiloh covers more than 2,800 rolling acres of nature's most prolific native tall grasses, with hardwood trees and deep draws, several of which have large spring-fed lakes and ponds. Several creeks meander through the property, with the most significant and most consistent stream, dubbed Cricket's Creek, running along the property's back border. Leading to the house was a quarter-mile-long chert road, with a ranch entry made from local stone and rustic wooden post and crossbar. Visitors were always welcomed. Over the years, Charlie and his father worked to construct the primary home where Charlie could raise his own family. It was a rustic wood and stone structure with over 4,800 square feet of living space, 6 bedrooms, and a large great room designed to entertain guests. A large country kitchen and a dining area contained a rustic wooden table that would comfortably accommodate 12 people. The home was entirely surrounded by a large wraparound porch, complete with several rockers and 2 porch swings. The kitchen door opened up to the back of the house, where Charlie and Claire had built a large stone patio, complete with a large fire pit in the center, and patio tables and other seating. Over the years, the patio area has hosted many community and family gatherings. The large barn, located just down the hill from the main house, was beautiful, and it was surrounded by several pens for cattle and horses. The barn contained equipment storage, tack rooms, and horse stalls. Adjacent to the barn, Charlie had constructed a wood and stone bunkhouse, capable of housing 8 full-time workers living on site. There was a smaller home on the western end of the property. Charlie's grandfather built that home on the original 40-acre tract he had purchased in the 1950s after returning home following his service in World War II. That home was where Charlie was raised and was now the home of his daughter Jessie, her husband William Skip Preston, and their 2 children. Adjacent to their home was the original barn and smaller corral that Charlie's father and grandfather had built in the 1950s. It had long been Charlie's dream to have his own children and grandchildren living on the property that represented the hard work and sacrifice of his own father and grandfather. A Righteous Man. March 20th, 2009. Friday morning. Margie's Cafe. "Good morning, Margie," Charlie announced his arrival. "It's going to be a great day today, don't you think?" Charlie took his usual seat at the large round table. "What's up, guys?" This morning, the group consisted of Charlie, Dale Manning, Chris Waters, Jack Graham, and their newcomer, Devlin Barber. "Luke won't be here this morning," Charlie continued, "and I'm going to have to leave a little bit early. I'm headed up to Mayetta for the day." "What's in Mayetta, other than the reservation?" Devlin asked. "Part pleasure and part business," Charlie answered. "I have a number of friends in the area. I'm also going to recruit some help for the burn. They usually have a lot of young workers who are eager to help." "Charlie has a strong personal connection with the Potawatomi," Chris interjected. "His friendship goes all the way back to when Charlie was just a teenager. Charlie and his family have often served with youth in the area." "So it's like a church mercy mission type of thing?" Devlin asked. "Not at all," Charlie was quick to respond. "These are true friends of mine. I like working with the youth there, and my own children have developed relationships there. It's a 45-minute ride from here, but we try to get up at least 3 or 4 times a year." If you've never been to a real powwow, Dale interjected, get Charlie to take you with him this fall. It's a beautiful and festive celebration of the Native American culture. So you have a son and a daughter? Devlin inquired. 5 kids altogether. In addition to Caleb and Jesse, I have a daughter, Taylor, who is in college at Nebraska, and Wes and Lucy are still at home, Charlie answered. Guys, I hate to cut and run, but I need to get on up the road, Charlie concluded. As he headed toward the door, he turned back. Thanks, Margie. Do what you can to keep these guys in line. As he started to leave, Jack reminded Charlie. Hey, Charlie, don't forget, we have a Mercy Committee meeting after church this Sunday. Look forward to it. See you then. Charlie headed out the door. Devlin turned to Jack. I get the impression you and Charlie are pretty close. Jack responded. As I recall, Charlie was around 17 or 18 years old when he and his dad showed up on my doorstep. I had just bought my ranch when these 2 strangers showed up, welcomed me to the area, and asked what they could do to help me get started. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, Jack continued. I had worked on a ranch to help pay for my school, and I was convinced I could manage one myself. But I had to learn a few things from the school of hard knocks to really get things going. Charlie and his dad had the experience and never hesitated to help. Seems to be a stand-up guy, Devlin remarked. He's the best, Chris echoed Jack's remarks. Charlie is involved in leadership in our church. He has a real servant's heart. He's pretty humble about his involvement, but truthfully, I don't know how he manages to run a ranch and still serve wherever he's needed. Responding to Chris, Devlin asked, So what's your relationship to him? Charlie and I go back to high school together, Chris responded. He was one of the groomsmen at my wedding, and my daughter Jewel is a close friend of Jesse's. We've even gone on a couple of short-term mission trips together. I haven't known Charlie as long as Chris or Jack, Dale stepped in. My boys, Scott and Blake, play ball with Charlie's son, Caleb. Jack continued. Claire is heavily involved in the church's outreach to widows and serves on the hospital visitation team. Charlie has always liked working with the boys' youth outreach. He seems to have a gift for ministering to kids who are in difficult or broken homes. He says they need a role model, a mentor to teach them what it means to be a good father. That's part of his connection to the Potawatomi people. Not to keep pouring it on, Chris continued to praise. Charlie and Claire have been married more than 25 years, but Charlie talks about it like they are still on their honeymoon. The whole family is an example of what I believe God wants from us as husbands and fathers, Jack continued. Charlie's not perfect by any means, but you can see his values reflected in all 5 of his children, and that has an impact on others who know him. At this point, Devlin jumped back into the conversation. Guys, you talk about Charlie like he's some kind of saint. I am sure there are flaws in his character. I mean, I don't want to speak ill of the man. I guess I just don't know him that well. In fact, Devlin continued, from what I know of the man, his life, family, and marriage looks like some kind of fairy tale. Next thing you're going to tell me is that Claire was living with 3 ugly stepsisters, and Charlie showed up with a silver slipper to sweep her off her feet. Glass slipper, Jack replied. What? Devlin answered. Cinderella lost a glass slipper, not a silver one, Jack retorted. But no, Charlie is not the handsome prince that rescued Claire from a broken home. You see, I've known both of them for a long time. Charlie and Claire were high school sweethearts. She was a cheerleader, and Charlie was a defensive back right here at Wamego High. They went their separate ways after graduation. Claire went to Washburn down in Topeka, and Charlie went to K-State. After they graduated, they picked up right where they had left off. They got married and started a family right there on Charlie's family ranch. From what I understand, Charlie has a pretty impressive ranch, Devlin remarked. Noticing Devlin's tone, Chris was quick to answer. Charlie's grandfather started the ranch. His name was James Christian. Folks around here called him Slim. It was fairly small back then. Charlie grew up working on the ranch and went to school to get a degree in livestock management so he could help his dad run the ranch. Charlie's mom died when he was 5 years old, leaving Charlie and his 7-year-old sister to grow up on the ranch. Charlie has put a lot of sweat and tears into that ranch. His dad died 10 or 15 years ago, Jack remarked. I knew him pretty well. He was a good man. I know you guys admire Charlie, and I get that, said Devlin. Still, when you look at how God has blessed him, who wouldn't praise God under those circumstances? He has a great wife and family. He's respected by everyone in the community and in the church. On top of all that, he has the largest ranch in the area, and everything in his life is perfect. It's like God has built a protective hedge around the man, and no problems, trials, pains, or adversity will ever be able to touch him. At this point, Jack interrupted. Hold on now, Devlin. Charlie's been my friend for a very long time. I know him well enough to tell you that I believe his relationship with God can withstand any trial that the devil can throw at him. I can't explain why God has given him so much material prosperity in his life, and any more than I can explain why another man of faith has to endure a harder road. But Charlie's the real deal. Devlin responded. Look, Jack, I am not saying that Charlie is a bad guy. I just wonder, if he experienced a terrible trial, or if he lost everything he has, would Charlie still be the same man of integrity that he appears to be? Or would he turn his back on God? I guess I'm a bit biased, Jack responded. But I truly believe Charlie is a lot stronger than that. Devlin, you visited our church Sunday, Jack continued. Do you remember what Pastor Pete said in the service last Sunday? He quoted Isaiah. It was somewhere in chapter 45 where God talks about his sovereignty over the universe. Do you remember what he said? Oh, yeah, Devlin answered. Isaiah said that God created the light and the darkness, and that he creates well-being and calamity. He also said that Satan prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to attack. Do you think Charlie is immune? No, Jack's response came. First of all, Charlie hasn't had an easy life. God has blessed him, his family, and the work of his hands, but nothing has simply fallen into his lap. Second, although Charlie may not have experienced what you would call a devastating trial, he knows both passages well, and I believe he would come right back to those passages if something did. Maybe so, came Devlin's response. Don't get me wrong. I don't want anything bad to happen to him. I just think it's easier to trust God when things are going well than it is when your world is falling apart. As they got up to leave, Chris chimed in. Devlin, I'm with Jack on this, but in all truth, I hope we never find out. Margie had just walked over to the table. Boys, are you going to sit here all morning jawing at each other, or do you plan on working today? She smiled. Chris responded. Looks like it's my turn to cover. Ring us up and we'll get out of your hair. They laughed as Chris picked up the tab and they headed out the door. Cotton Eye Joe, Shiloh, March 27th, 2009, Friday night. The joint project between Jack and Charlie was a great success. Working as a team, they moved Jack's cattle to a section of his property on the western end, directly across the road from Jesse's home, to allow for a burn on the southern and eastern parts of the property. They moved Charlie's livestock to the southeastern part of Shiloh, directly across the road from Dan Prager's Broken Spur Ranch. Charlie had hired 6 young men from Mayetta to assist with the projects. They finished the move and the burn on Thursday afternoon. Charlie and Claire had a tradition that involved entertaining the workers from both ranches and a few locals. The large stone patio in the rear of the house was perfect for these types of gatherings. The weather was perfect for the occasion, with temperatures in the mid-60s and not a cloud in the sky. Charlie had 7 men who worked for him on a full-time basis. 5 of them lived in the bunkhouse, and 2 commuted from their homes nearby. They nicknamed 24-year-old Paco Garcia Rev because he seemed to have a Bible verse memorized to fit every occasion. Cole Thornton was a 54-year-old veteran ranch hand who was a cowboy through and through. At 6 feet 5 inches tall, the others nicknamed him Shorty. Cole was a widower, and his daughter Lacey was a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy. Cody Begay was 25 years old. He came to live and work on the ranch when he was just 17 years old. Cody moved off the ranch 2 years ago to start his own family. He was the proud father of a 7-month-old son named Benjamin. Cody and his wife Deani asked Charlie and Claire to be godparents to Benji, who was born with Down syndrome. Calvin Red Gardner was 34 years old and had only worked with Charlie for a couple of years, as did Jalen Damon. Jalen was married and commuted to work on the ranch. At 19, Levi Calhoun was the youngest but physically strongest of the group. Levi had a guitar and a banjo and played both very well. On any given night, Levi and Willie Skeeter Harris, who played guitar and fiddle, would break out their instruments for a bunkhouse sing-along. On this particular night, after Charlie opened by thanking God for blessing the work of all involved, people began filling up their plates. At the same time, Levi Skeeter and a couple of guys from Jack's Ranch decided to put on an impromptu concert from the back porch. The music was impressive. The singing was somewhat off-key, but the songs were familiar, and people could not resist singing along. When they started playing the Alabama song, Fiddle in the Band, the group replaced the word Texas with Kansas, and everyone shouted out, "If you're gonna play in Kansas, you gotta have a fiddle in the band." As it turned out, Skeeter was quite proficient with the fiddle, and cheers went up when he cut loose on the solo in the song. The group improvised a bluegrass version of Rocky Top. The highlight of the performance came when they started playing the Kansas State version of the Wabash Cannonball. One of the more special moments of the evening came when the boys broke into a crude rendition of Cotton Eye Joe. When they began playing, Jessie grabbed her daddy by the hand and dragged him to the patio center. Charlie took the hint and immediately showed off some dance moves that brought a roar of approval from the guests. Charlie swung his daughter around the patio with dance moves that were part bop, part swing, and part jitterbug. Jessie's smile couldn't have been bigger. She loved challenging Charlie, and he loved playing along with his oldest daughter. Not to be outdone, Caleb grabbed his mom by the hand and joined the show. Wes and Lucy were surprised by their parents' skills. "Did you know they could dance?" Wes asked his equally bewildered sister. After the crowd began to settle, Charlie walked to the center of the patio beside the fire pit and addressed the group. "Folks, Jack, Claire, Rita, and I want to express our appreciation for the work that we accomplished this week. God has greatly blessed our families, and one of the greatest blessings is the blessing of having good friends. For those of you who work here at Shiloh, and I know that I speak for Jack as well, you are not just workers to us. You are family members and friends. Our work is not easy, but it is rewarding. We love you, and we appreciate each and every one of you." The guests echoed their appreciation and approval as Charlie put his arm around Claire. As their guests began removing toward their respective homes, Charlie spoke to Claire. "You know, we really are blessed. God has blessed us in so many ways that I can't put into words."
You've reached the conclusion to part 1 of Charlie's story. We will continue it on the next YouTube video. We will continue the story as God removes the hedge from Charlie's life and it opens the door for some true adversity and trial in the life of this wonderful family. Thank you for listening.